I'm Holly Dietz, and these are my weird ideas. This is episode 11, where we talk about artists and artisans. Do you identify as one or the other? Is this something you even think about much? Do you wonder what each of these might look like in the future? I'm happy to have Anthony Bluemmel as my guest today. He's a filmmaker experienced in live action and animation, and he currently works in AI for a Fortune Tech 10 company. I'm so happy you're here and we get to chat today. My hope
Me
is,
too.
I
Like,
know it's just
yeah.
really cool. And, I hope that we start off somewhere and end up in a completely different place and we've blown our own minds. So, what are we talking about today? Artists and artisans. What, which one are you?
First of all, thank you for having me. This is very cool. Very
Mhm.
excited. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, that's an excellent question. I think I would lean towards the artist, but I also think every artist is also an artisan. Um, after so much experience, they kind of hone in on that craft and become a master of it. So I think it's a best of both worlds. And
Okay.
I think I would say every artist kind of wants to become both at some point. Um, because to
Well,
me that makes them a master of their field or of their specific craft.
right. Well, I identify as an artisan. Full stop. I have no artistic ability, and I will say that I suppose that most people who are like me, who are just pure artisans, are really envious of people who can even be part of the art or have part of the artist thing in them. So kudos to you, sir.
Oh, thank you.
Wish that I could say that that's the case. And so, how does this play out in your life? How are you using your artistic ability and tell us about it.
Sure. So as a writer, filmmaker, a lot on the production side, but always been a writer. And so, lately, after having graduated from my MFA, um, I've done live action shorts, currently on a animation film that I've been producing. And then I have just finished this year a animated short, a script that is on the festival circuit right now.
That's so
And
cool.
yeah, and so like anyone who's a writer knows the writing is never done. So sometimes it can feel like a curse. You kind of always are iterating and nothing is ever really done. I think that's like a point I think I want to drive home, especially when it comes to writing, is no matter how good you think it is, like step away for a week, come back and like there's room for improvement.
Right, right.
But yeah, for me, it's been focused on the production of that animated film and then writing, and I feel like that animated short I've been writing is all but done until a next step is taken. So yeah, for me, it's that, and then honestly, ideating. Like I sometimes, personally, it's hard to get idea to paper. And
Okay.
myself, like especially original, so I'll say it's much easier from like a producer standpoint to come to a writer or have a writer come to me and then want to work out a script. I think I'm good at notes and then finding what that core idea of a story is and then helping that writer flesh that out. Um, as a writer myself, I have a bit of a, I guess, an OCD curse, if you will, or perfectionist curse, where unless I can get to a point where I know like it's perfect, it's going to be really hard for me to get something on the page. Um, and I'm definitely trying to work past that. The
Okay,
left
you've
brain,
made
the
me
left.
think of something here.
Mhm.
I'm gonna interrupt you. Sorry
Sure.
to do that, but you're making me think of something. And this, I'm not saying this is good, and I'm not saying this is something that anyone should want. But just like we know that in the music industry we have algorithms and programs that producers use that sort of say we know what people like, we plug this in. I'm oversimplifying it, obviously, but what would you think about something like that from a writing perspective? If there if you were if your goal was to write something for a particular audience, and if this, not device, but if this algorithm or this bot or this something, this artificial intelligence, could plug it in and it could tell you the places that you could change things to make it more palatable or more interesting to your target audience. Is that just gross? Or like what is how does that make you feel?
Um, that's a good question. I think when you look at Hollywood today, especially like the studio system, so like the big guys,
Yeah.
I think that's already happening. But well, I don't think it is happening.
Okay.
It's just human beings doing it instead of AI doing it to
Okay.
a
So it's
writer.
we've moved beyond the South Park manatee in a tank picking shows. Um and so but it's are we are we far from that though? I mean, is it how much different is it when we allow an algorithm to tell us, no, that was great, but if you change this here and there, essentially you'll make more money.
Sure.
Uh,
Yeah, I think if if you want to look at how like a studio executive operates, they're probably already operating on the data provided by that algorithm. So I I suppose if you want to argue that they're just relaying information that an artificial intelligence gives them or the algorithm gives them that tells them, you know, A is better than B or so on and so forth.
right,
It, it's it's already being done. So I would say like the studio executive is probably the mouthpiece for the algorithm at this point.
okay,
I think where, and I think that and therein lies the issue, is especially this is why I like it, like indie cinema, because if you get into the studio system, the goal of a studio is to make money. And I think you
right,
see that with like what's going on with Marvel right now and like Disney in general is, what can we do that makes us money, not like what can we make that is like interesting and original and so on and
yeah,
so forth. And I think that's why you see like box office results of like the latest Marvel tentpoles are all dipping. And the same goes for like on the Warner side. And like Warner isn't an issue in and of itself, but um like their big superhero tentpoles over the summer, those all underperformed. But now granted, there's other issues that are affecting that, like the changing of the guard for who runs DC and whatnot. But um so I think those decisions are already finding their ways into those types of movies, which is why I think indie cinema is as big as it is right now. And you want to
okay,
look at like last year, like everything everywhere all at once,
yes,
um, was huge. And this comes from A24, and this I believe currently stands as their largest like box office run to date. Um, and that was a relatively small budget film that was focused on like creativity and character and whatnot, and it resonated, um, so much so that it won the Oscar, right? And I don't
right,
think I think that was kind of an anomaly because that kind of movie is not typical Oscar bait. And I was having this conversation with someone this morning of like when I go to a movie or a film, however you want to classify it,
sure,
in the months of like November, December, early January, I can come out of that and like instantly know whether or not this was like purposefully made to be an Oscar contender, right? And I
right,
think that's where like um everything everywhere kind of fit in last year because it came out in the summer. And this is another thing like in terms of like what the algorithm kind of feeds you to do is there are certain movies that are only for the summer. And that's because you want butts and seats. Those budgets are bigger, families have more time to go to the movies, and so on and so forth. But I think you know that is also shifting, as well. Like, I mean, like Barbie and Oppenheimer, for instance,
right,
those will both probably be Oscar nominated films, in some capacity. But those are summer movies. Everything Everywhere was a summer movie. So I think the problem and I don't think this is like an AI issue or whatnot, but old data suggests certain things should be done at certain times, and I think it's kind of biting the bigger studios in the butt,
Right.
if you will.
Yeah. Well,
But
here,
yeah,
so you're talking to someone who I don't go to the movie theater. I will probably never go to a movie theater again. I enjoy watching movies in my home theater, and it's such a better experience for me.
mhm.
And I also am one of those weirdos who wishes that awards didn't exist. I wish the Oscars didn't exist. I wish the Golden Globes, all this. I wish we could just make art. I wish we could just
Yeah.
make movies, or if we're talking about music or whatever. I understand that there's this quest for recognition and such, but do you do you think we'll ever see a time when we don't have those things anymore?
Oh,
Or is this just too loaded a topic from a
n-
person who's too weird to even really talk about it?
um, so I guess I'll touch on kind of each of the points that you had made. I was an advocate, and I kind of got shunned for this a bit in film school. And this, I started film school in the middle of the pandemic,
Right.
ended it on the tail end. So I spent half of it on Zoom and then half in the classroom. And I had an argument that a theater wasn't necessary to
Hmm.
enjoy the work. And everyone's like, "Oh, that's stupid. Like, where do people go on dates?" And I'm like, "Well, it's the 21st century. There's plenty to do."
Right.
Um, but sure, I get the argument. And no, that was coming from me who had not been to a theater, who had the luxury of everything that was going to be in a theater coming into my home,
Right.
which admittedly was fantastic. But I will also say it's kind of like a twofold thing. There are certain films that I would absolutely prefer to see on a screen in a theater, um, like a Nolan film, for instance, or like Denis
But we
Villeneuve,
know how
like
he feels about this.
right. And like I think like there's an appreciation of the artistry um, to like that kind of makes me want to go and support something, right, in a theater and kind of get that experience. Like a lot of and this is subjective, so like you may not want to ever go to the theater again. I may only want to go for certain movies.
Yeah.
I also like, if there's a small indie film that gets theatrical run and I'm super interested, I'm gonna go because I want to support them. Like I like A24, like Neon, like XYZ, all these sort of smaller. A24 is really not small anymore, but the smaller companies,
Yeah.
right? They get a theatrical run for their film. I want to go to the theater and support it. And like that's, as a filmmaker, as someone who loves film, like that's a way for me to do it.
Okay. That
Is
makes
going.
sense. Yes.
So I think for me, it's a mix of like, is this a big movie that kind of requires me to see it on the big screen? And so like my theater visits now are primarily either me supporting something small or it's like IMAX, like because like that's the way it was shot to be seen on that with like the proper sound, um, proper projector and whatnot. And so like that's kind of how I view theater versus no theater.
Okay. Well,
But
let
at the
me
same
ask you
time,
that.
go ahead. Yeah.
This is gonna get weird. Okay, not too weird, but you're making me think of things, and so this is your fault. Okay. So we could make the case that film, movies, whatever you want to call them, however they're, however you think about them, they're one of the last forms of art that are accessible to most people, right? Most people, not all people, have some way of watching movies, even if all they have is their phone,
Yep.
right? This is
Hmm.
a possibility, not for everyone, but for most people. But there are plenty of people who absolutely cannot afford to go. to the movies and certainly can't afford to take their families. Maybe they can't afford a subscription to the different services, or maybe they can't afford cable. Maybe they get their movies because they subscribe to, something through their library. But my point is that for most people who are interested at all in, and maybe don't even think about this as art, it is really one of the last ways for just the general public to experience art. So that's my premise. So that being said, what is your take on someone like Nolan? And I'm not picking on Nolan, he doesn't care what I think anyway, but who is very adamant about making movies a certain way for a certain thing and screens. But then aren't you just excluding entire groups of people? And I don't know what the answer to this is, but what you're saying is just making me think of this, that we have this art form and we could be doing it in a way to where everyone could enjoy it. I'm not saying we should. I'm not exactly sure what I'm saying, but do you see where I'm going with this? Is there any point to be made here, or am I just being, um, am I just poking a bear?
No, I see what you're saying. I think I would say there's, as a viewer, as a consumer, like there's no wrong way to watch a movie. Now, like film school elitists may tell you so.
I'm sure they would.
I
Yes.
I don't consider myself one of them. I would say like I loved Oppenheimer. It was great. Like Cillian Murphy was great. The score was fantastic. Cinematography, everything was great. But if your only ability to watch it is on like a free trial of HBO Max, or not even Max or HBO Max, but just Max,
Yeah.
when it drops on the platform on your, you know, iPhone 8, then do it. Because I think at the end of the day, like, and I think Nolan would agree that as long as you can consume the art and witness it, and then be able to take that and either it inspire you, you talk about it, it changes your life, it does nothing for you, whatever.
Right.
But the act of being able to consume it, I think, is what's ultimately important. For me, I'm fortunate to have the means to go and see it in the way that he would recommend to fully experience it. And I'm appreciative of that, that I have the ability to do that. But I think if someone doesn't, that should not deter them from being able to watch it in some capacity.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think this is literally just thought of this as you were talking about things. So I just sprung this on you. Obviously, you did not know this was coming, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but it reminded me of when I was a kid, and at the local library, you could check out records and even artwork, which seems sort of strange. I know there are still libraries where you can check out artwork, and I think maybe we've sort of forgotten, or we don't think about, movies are not just for entertainment, even though they are entertaining, it can be life changing. And what's life changing for you is probably not going to be the same thing that's life changing for me. And I don't know. It's just a thought experiment, and I was just going to get your take on it. But yeah, I agree. I think that watch the things that you're
Yeah.
interested in the way that you can, and don't be intimidated by someone, who, even if it's the director who says this was made for the theater in this way, that I'm not going to try and tell you what it is. You're the filmmaker. I don't even know what Nolan is talking about, but
Yeah.
just watch it. Yeah.
In in regard to that, I would like, he will say that, sure, but like at some point it will not be in a theater. It's not feasible to maintain that in a theater for, you know, eons, right?
Right.
So, and eventually it would have to find itself on another platform. So maybe initially, like your initial viewing, and maybe he can go about a better way of saying it, but like the goal is that initial viewing to be in that theater if you can do it. If not, wait till it comes on streaming platform, or you can rent it through Apple or Google or whatever, if you can afford it that way. Um, but I think every filmmaker, every artist, at the end of the day, wants you to consume their work in some form. Like, otherwise,
Why
what is
would
the
they make
point
it?
of art?
Yeah, what yeah, you're right. Exactly. Okay, so all right, I'm gonna segue a little bit and I'm gonna go back to my original premise, which is about artists and artisans and how I I have no artistic ability, but due to the recent innovations of things like MidJourney, Runway, etc., I can take ideas that are in my head and see them sort of come to life on my screen. This does not make me an artist at all. It doesn't make me anything. It just means I know how to use this tool. But what what's your thoughts on these sorts of tools in the hands of people like me who don't know anything? What I mean, obviously, your career is not in danger from anything I'm gonna do because I don't know what I'm doing. But what do you think about it?
Sure. So I would say, first on the artist first artisan thing, as I'm kind of reflecting, on the conversation thus far, now I'm kind of on the fence of like, is there really a difference? Because the paintbrush had to come into existence before someone could paint. So someone obviously had the idea, but didn't have the tool to do it. So are we at a point where someone like you or others like you are at that sort of inflection point where the tool didn't exist, so you couldn't get your idea on the paper, so to speak, but now the tool has been created for you, and now you have a means to do it. So I don't know if
Okay,
I
but
would.
here's my this is why this came up. This idea came up with me. It was maybe 7 or 8 years ago. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine that I hadn't seen in like 20 years, and she was painting. She had taken up painting, and she had she was concerned that she was not as good as she could be, and we had this long conversation about because at the time I was a jeweler or pretending to be one, and we were having this conversation about making things, and all of a sudden it dawned on me that we were having two different conversations because what my sort of issues with making were that I can copy most anything, and it's not a problem because I had the skills to do the copying, right? So thus the artisan. She didn't have quite the skills to get onto the canvas what was in her head, but she had all of the vision in her head. So all she needed to do was hone her skills a little bit, right? No amount of training for me is going to make me be able to have a good idea. Or even if you gave me a blank canvas and came back 2 hours later, it would still be a blank canvas. And it's not because I have analysis paralysis or because I'm embarrassed about what you might think of my skills. I don't have that creative vision in my head to then put it on the canvas, even if I had the skills to do it. So when I'm using MidJourney, let's just use MidJourney for instance, like because we're staring at this image that I actually created in MidJourney. I'm extremely simplistic. I'm like, some robots in a museum talking about stuff. That's as far as I can go with this. I have no, I don't have that creative vision. You do. So you're able to say, I have these ideas in my head, and you can put them on paper. You can then get that in on film or whatever else it is. So no matter how great my skills in quotation marks, are at telling MidJourney what I want it to do, I'm never going to be an artist. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's hard.
I
I
know it's a tough one. But you're the idea guy, and I'm just the copy paster.
Sure. So would you then say in an instance where maybe you have, let's say you start a business and your business is you take people like ideators' ideas, right? They are creators, but they just can't get, paint on the canvas, so to speak. But they
Right.
have a great idea, right? So they come to you and say, "Hey, here's the vision. Can you implement the vision?" Is that kind of what
Yeah, I think
you,
that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. But I don't think that I'm not saying I ever have the skills to do what, but let's pretend that I did. Let's pretend that for some reason I'm an amazing painter. Like if you give me an example, I can copy it and maybe that's what some of the great forgers did. I don't know. I don't know these people. But but as far as initial idea, it's never going to be mine. So which one though? Let's say that I am an amazing painter and you give me this idea that comes from your head and you sort of sketch it out for me, basic, bare bones, you give me your color scheme and I'm like, "Oh, okay. Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, I can do that." Well, who was the artist?
I mean, I think this happens every day. Like with, I mean, take animation for instance. You have someone who's written a script. They have a vision. Let's say they have a storyboard that someone did, and now you go to an animator and an artist, or and you have like a colorist, and you have a compositor, blah blah blah. And you say, "Can you enact my vision?" Um, or can you animate this and can you draw this? I wouldn't say that makes them any less of an artist. I mean,
Right.
just be,
But you've got the writer part. So that's the artist. You have got this, you're dealing with two or more types of artists here, writers and animators, right?
true, but I think in this context, like you would have to be considered an artist because you would have to implement like the vision, just like the previous scenario where
Damn it.
um
You're you're disproving my theory.
I mean it
Oh,
happens like a graphic designer, it's like, hey, and you and I have been through this before. It's like
yes.
we have an idea, like this is what it is, like here's kind of what we like for a logo, like can you take this and do something with it? And then someone does something with it. And so I think, and I wouldn't say that like you wouldn't have a creative or you don't have a creative bone in your body. I
It's
wouldn't
a
s-
small one.
I wouldn't say, I mean, if even if I gave you gave you a prompt or an idea and I was like, can you, we're on MidJourney and I want to do some weird little, 30-second experimental AI film. I was like, I need all of these characters so I can go plug them into like Runway or Stable Diffusion or Pika or whatever.
Yeah.
And like, here's like a basic idea. Here's some comps
Yeah.
for these
You have
characters.
to give me the basic idea. This is the problem. I can't start with the basic idea. Like that's what, and this is, I don't want to turn this into like what is wrong with my brain that I don't, I can't think of things. But I think it's just more like I know that there are a lot of people, a lot of artists who are really afraid of a lot of this tech, and they probably should be. I'm not discounting that at all. But I'm just saying, from my point of view, from where I sit, this stuff is only as good as you already are. It's really hard to do anything really phenomenal without having some sort of background to begin with. I mean, none of my stuff, some of my stuff is like, oh, that's kind of cool, but it would be taken apart in a heartbeat and just like, wow, that's actually crap. Um, but then the people who I learn this stuff from, who are actually artists, They were artists before all of this stuff came about, whether they were graphic artists or artists on canvas or whatever, and then decided to adopt some of this AI technology as part of what they do. They're the real badasses, at least from what I've seen so far. It's there. You're not worried about people like me. They just take the tool and do amazing things. But once again, that's just my opinion from the little I have experienced with this, and not making my living as an artist or an artisan. I think it's very easy for me to sit and pontificate about it as well. So that's, yeah, the caveat there.
Sure. I think the idea of being an artist is a complicated one because, in some way, shape, or form, I think most, if not all of us are. Like growing up, a lot of us had Legos, and like as a child, like I'm not following directions. I'm just kind of building whatever the hell I want. Um, and
And
like,
I couldn't. This is what I'm telling you. I had to have the direction.
so then I
Terrible.
guess, are there methods to maybe untap even just a sliver of that creativity? I mean, is there some sort of method that you can, go on a walkabout, do like some hashish?
I was gonna say, I think hallucinogens might have to come into play here. I'm
And I mean,
not
maybe,
sure. Yeah, I hadn't
maybe,
really thought about that in that way. That could be an interesting that could be an
yeah,
interesting.
yeah, I would say maybe it's there, but it's just under lock and key at the moment.
Oh, that that's we'll see. Um, I say we'll see. We probably won't, but yeah, you never know. Um, okay. Well, if there's anything, I mean, we've just barely touched the surface. I mean, let's face it. We've made some points and talked about some stuff. But if you if there's something that I interrupted you on or that you wanted to get across and didn't, speak now.
um, no, I don't think so. I think, the conversation of or your question of whether or not an algorithm is kind of affecting the current state of like filmmaking. Um, I would say yes, but not in the sense of AI at the moment. In the sense of the way analytics and data-driven CEOs drive their decision making,
Right.
um, and sometimes these these higher ups are ego driven and limit art, because of a fear of not breaking even or hitting a number, or so on and so forth. I think you look like Warner Brothers is the big culprit of that right now. So,
Okay.
um, so I think to end the conversation on is AI affecting what is being seen, um, or how something is being marketed, or the internal decision making of the Hollywood studio system? I would say no, in terms, at least in regard of AI solely being responsible, or an algorithm solely being responsible for it. I think it's a mix of ego, and I think it's just a mix of CEOs and you know uh, executives taking information and then driving their decisions based on information with a mix
Okay.
of humanity, because all of a lot of us are egotistical in some way, shape, or form. Um, and that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Surely not. Yes.
Um, but I think, to answer that question, not yet. And honestly, it may better the system if AI does start making those decisions, because then you're going to remove the human component out of like screwing someone over will be left out of that. Um,
Oh, hadn't thought of it that way.
yeah, so
That's an interesting take.
maybe an executive hates the director, and that executive came in after that film was already being worked on, and agreements were agreed upon, and they're fu to that person is just to shelve it for quote unquote tax reasons. Um, so I think
Right.
if you want to look at it from that perspective, AI could be a benefit to some filmmakers. It takes the
Hmm.
human decision component out of it. Um, and I say maybe, it's not happened, so I don't know what it would even look like. But it could help, it could not help, just like everything else going on in the space right
Right.
now.
No, no, for sure. I mean, we can pontificate all we want, but no one knows what even the world is going to look like 5 years from now, and certainly not the film world. And I mean, I'm not opposed to certain things being taken over by AI in the art world, but I'm certainly not ready for a full blown all the actors are no. But will I change my mind on that someday? Probably, because I won't know the difference.
Sure. No, I would say like of all of the concerns about AI and art, and I'm kind of focusing more on like the filmmaking industry. Um, from my perspective, the problem, like the true, like, no, I'm not calling it a doomsday scenario, but the real issue is image likeness. I don't think, I think the writer's strike was, I, I think the media kind of misguided some of the concerns with AI because like I've used certain tools and I can tell you until it becomes sentient and understands feelings and experiences and can then do something with those experiences, we're fine. And even at that point, I don't know what that would look like in the form of a screenplay
Yeah,
or a story.
that makes
Um,
sense.
so in terms of writing, I don't think it's an issue. Um, but the problem to me, and I think this is why the SAG strike went on for so long, is it is very easy now and sort of not that any of these systems are rudimentary, but like with what we have now to easily replicate someone's likeness and even their voice.
Oh yeah,
Um,
the voice is yeah.
so I think in terms of the Hollywood perspective of like what is AI, the threat of AI in Hollywood, I think it's more so for actors than it is for writers right now. Um,
I wonder
and
how many people
Yep.
whose family members were actors back in the day and they're now deceased and they own their intellectual property. Are they sort of rubbing their hands together greedily, saying, "Oh, we can license um, Fatty Arbuckle"? I'm just picking some random um, person, but how? I just wonder how that will go.
That's a great question. Of course, I can't remember from my like entertainment law class, but there was a section that we went into kind of based on how to utilize the rights of someone who's deceased. That would be an excellent conversation for an entertainment lawyer if you happen to have one to bring on in the future.
Ooh,
Um,
that's a good idea.
there you go.
Thank you for that one. Yeah, because certainly that is something that I think a lot about because it is a really easy thing to do at this point, voice especially. I mean, we're already doing it. We have Jimmy Stewart now reading people bedtime stories. So I suppose the quick answer might be whoever owns the rights can grant the the ability to do it. I don't know.
I don't know either, but I think we'll see that sooner than later. I mean, not to go on a tangent again, but I just read an article about who was it? Was it Kiss? Just ended their
Oh my! Couldn't wait for it. I was so excited. I knew it would be them.
yeah, they officially retired from touring, but now they have digital avatars that will go on tour for
Yeah,
them. And what I thought was really interesting about that article is it kind of highlighted a goal for them or a scenario in which Kiss is playing a stadium show at 10 different venues at the
yeah.
same time across
Same
the
time.
country.
I know,
Um,
right? With no worry that anyone is getting sick or tired or has a miscue, you know,
yep, yep.
which is. I mean, let's face it, it's kind of I mean, that's a big deal for any performer of any age or whatever, but I mean, come on, how much longer could they possibly go on?
Sure. Now
Like,
immortalized as a
and
digital
I just thought,
being.
of course, it's Kiss, of course, which is just fantastic. I'm there for that. Not really, because I won't be there, but I'm there in spirit for that.
Sure. But I think this brings an excellent question that, if you can get someone in the entertainment legal field is, can they do that forever? Can their estates continue to tour 100 years
Yeah.
from now and continue to make money?
I guess
Um,
if you write it the right way, and Gene Simmons will make sure, at least in this case, that it is written in the
sure.
correct
Yeah.
way.
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if there's a scenario, because you get, like, I mean, you see like something like Poe, or I guess would be a good example of public domain. Like his estate, whatever it is, if it even
Yeah,
exists anymore, is not making money off of his material.
right.
So does that fall under that, trademark copyright law of, I guess it'd be more trademark, or IP of
Yeah,
how long does it last? Because like Mickey Mouse is about to be public domain.
yeah. And what is it? Is it a film? Is it a what is this performance that Kiss is doing 20 years from now when Kiss is performing, in a stadium in Denmark? What is that? I wonder how they're going to classify that
That's a great question.
under U.S. patent and trademark law or international, patent and trademark law. How does that? Oh, this is a whole other thing for. Well, the lawyers are always going to win, right? I mean, this at the end of the day, why did we not go to law school? But the lawyers are always going to win. So
The beauty of being a lawyer, at least a good one.
I guess, yeah, good, yeah, being a good lawyer, yeah, for sure. Okay, well, I think we have sort of hit the highlights today. I do want you to come back though, and let's talk about some other weird stuff involving film or the art world or something completely unrelated. I don't care. We'll just talk about weird stuff. Um, but I really appreciate you being here with me today and talking
Absolutely.
about these things. And also, if you're listening out there and you made it through this, really appreciate it. You have no idea how much it means to me that you listen to this episode. So, wherever you are, whether it's morning, afternoon, or evening, I wish you well, and we will see you next time.